Hi, everyone. This is Marilyn Bradford, and I would like to welcome you to my Left Turn podcast. What is your left turn? Writing a blog, parenting in a different way, letting go of the old because you are aware of something greater. Left turns are choices we can all make. It's about a willingness to step into the unknown in any area of your life, to trust yourself, to risk creating or trying something new. It's about letting your true uniqueness shine. The greatest people who have lived, artists, statesmen, writers, explorers, musicians, have all been people willing to turn left. What capacities do you have that you have not acknowledged? What would your life and the world be like if you were willing to turn left? Hello, everyone. This is Marilyn Bradford with Left Turn Podcast, and I'm delighted today to have Dr. Melissa Mahon as my guest. She's up there in chilly Chicago. She is a certified facilitator with Access. She's a Talk to the Entities facilitator, a mom with amazing kids, loves to travel, and she's my guest today to talk about all of the left turns that she's taken in her life. Welcome, Melissa.
Thank you so much. I'm so grateful to be here with you.
Well, let's start out with, what are some of the bigger left turns or the ones that made the most difference in your life? How's it been for you?
Yeah, I was really looking at that a little bit, knowing I was going to do this podcast with you. And I think that probably the biggest thing that I've chosen over the last few years was to quit my corporate job. I'm a clinical psychologist by trade, and I was working at a major medical facility that, did psychology the very medical model kind of way. And we were seeing way too many clients a week, and it was sort of it wasn't the best quality of care, I would say. And I did that for about 10 years. And once I started using Access Consciousness and started really playing with the tools and looking at what I'd like my life to be, I realized that something had to change. And it was interesting because it was sort of like the longer I knew it and didn't do anything with it, things were just like heavier and heavier, and my workout effort was going down, and people were like obviously not thrilled with me. And I was like, okay, I really need to change something here. And it's
the universe hit you over the head, kind of.
Right. And I was like, okay, I have to change something. This is actually killing me. And so I took a really big dive and opened my own private practice, and was able to start using the tools of Access Consciousness with clients, and doing psychology in a really different way. And I think for me, there was a lot of fear around that of, I'm going to be found out or something, I'm doing all these things that are actually helping people, and my clients were actually getting better. And it was so interesting to really start to see, first of all, how easy it was. I mean, was it perfect? No, but it was relatively easy to, build this caseload, and people were looking for something different. And so the ability to jump, I guess, was one of those things for me that was such a left turn. And everybody was like, you're never going to sustain a private practice. What are you doing? How are you going to get clients? And what do you mean you're using your Access Consciousness tools with your clients?
Yeah.
And it's been really cool now. That was about 3 years ago, give or take. And just to see how much everything has transformed and changed from that. But I guess for me, that's probably the biggest left turn, where people were like, you're crazy. Yeah. And what are you doing even with this Access Consciousness stuff? And now you're talking to entities, and you're, all of this stuff is so not normal as a psychologist. And sort of that willingness to say, it's creating for me, my life has gotten exponentially greater, and being willing to do it anyways, even if nobody else gets it.
I think that's amazing. I was a psychotherapist too. I'm a clinical social worker. And once I started using the Access tools, it was, wow, people were getting better faster. So a couple questions, just for general information. What tools have you found that really work? And do you ever talk about entities in your practice?
Yeah.
Oh,
So,
that's a big left turn.
that's a big left turn. And it's all about what can people hear, right?
Yes,
And
absolutely.
so it's not with everybody, and it's
Mhm.
not, and it's a lot of like really being in question of, is this going to contribute? Can people hear this? Does this person, if they have this awareness, will it actually change something in their life?
Yes.
And and so, I mean, some of the biggest tools that I use with clients, well, and myself, let's be honest,
Right.
are the who does this belong to?
Mhm.
Really, really, when people start to get that their thoughts, feelings, and emotions don't belong to them,
Mhm.
it's amazing because they'll
Yes.
start to have all these awarenesses of like, oh, I thought my whole life I was depressed. That was my mom's, you know?
Yes, I do know.
And
It's so cool.
and they can let go of things so much faster,
Mhm.
when they really start to get like, oh, all the things that I thought was like wrong with me, they're not, those things aren't even mine.
Yes.
And really starting to get that. And now I have clients like, yeah, I had this thing come up and I totally thought it was mine. And then I talked to my daughter and she ended up that she was having this like horrendous day and I was just aware.
Yes.
And so really getting people to see that they are aware has been, I think, really one of the greatest things.
That's
And
huge. Just
it's
huge. Whoever tells us that we're aware
nobody
or that we can know.
that 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 has come up so much lately with clients is the like, hey, what do you know? What
Mhm.
does your body know?
Mhm.
What are you actually aware of? Because, people go and they get all these professional opinions on, medication or a medical procedure, something that's, I have clients that come to talk to me about all these things and really asking them like, hey, what do you know? Is that going to create for you? Is it not? And there isn't a right or a wrong answer, but it's like being in the question of what are you aware of? If
Yes.
you're the source of your life and not what somebody else is feeding to you, then you start to have so much more clarity of like what you can create your life as and what will actually work versus what somebody else outside of you is telling you will work for whatever you're trying to change.
Yes. Yes. Well, and if you're feeling depressed and it's not yours, and the psychiatrist is pouring drugs onto you and talking about what's depressing you, it's insane. We get it. I mean, yes, it's absolutely insane, but
Yeah.
people have that experience a lot.
So much so because nobody says, hey, what if you're aware? Hey, what do you
Yes.
know? What will
Yes.
create for you? And
Yes.
and that's just not how, I mean, I look back on my training, years ago now to become a psychologist, and I actually work with students who are, in the process of getting their doctorate.
Oh, cool.
And yeah, it is actually really fun. And I get to teach this stuff to them too, which is really fun for me.
Wow.
They get to go into the world and have this awareness as they, have clients in their, future endeavors.
Mhm.
So that's been really neat. Um, and so yeah, I mean, when we talk about that, you really start to look at like, okay, hey, I know you weren't taught this in school. I wasn't taught this in school. And this is what this actually is. And
Mhm.
if you ask them, hey, what are you aware of? And even teaching them about things like allowance and being interesting point of view.
Wow.
I mean, all of those things totally change something than all the projections or expectations that even as a psychotherapist that you have
Mhm.
with clients. If you destroy and uncreate all of your projections and expectations and judgments that you have of somebody walking in the door, then they
Yes.
have a lot more choices available that you're not impelling anything at them and you're actually being in total interesting point of view and total allowance with them.
Yeah, that's so great. You found a way to really spread consciousness, give people different possibilities. That's beyond teaching. I mean, teaching classes are great or facilitating. We all like that. But what you're doing with those students is amazing. You're sending them out into the world prepared for their own left turns and for
Yeah.
being aware and for, creating actual change with people.
Yeah, thank you. It's something I you know, a lot of times you don't see what you're creating, you know, and so I don't think about it much.
Right, right. But I think what you're doing is really fantastic.
Oh, thank you so much. That's awesome. So yeah, I mean, it's been really cool to just kind of get to them to see things differently. I mean, even with like psychological disorders, as you know, some of the X-Men tools of access consciousness, of really kind of playing with the like, hey, like, what if you're not wrong? And you know, what if all the things you think are wrong with you or what's strong about you? You know,
Yes,
where we've talked kind of about like OCD or ADHD, those things come up a lot, and really starting to see like the gift that is in some of those things that often people come in and they're like, tell me what's wrong with me.
yes,
And
exactly.
if it wasn't like, hey, this is what's wrong with you, if it was like, hey, what about what's right with you?
What kinds of responses? I'd love to hear more about working with ADHD, OCD, that
Yeah.
kind of thing. What's worked for you and them, and how's it going, and what are they aware of? And
Yeah. Well, ADHD is something that comes up a ton because it's
uh-huh.
sort of like this buzzword that's, you know, all over TikTok and Instagram. And, you know, I mean, it's what everybody's talking about. And so it's all these, you know, adults who are now going, oh my gosh, I didn't realize I had this.
Mhm.
And so, you know, they come in and they're like, you know, can you diagnose me with ADHD? Can you tell me? I'm like, I mean, I could. And, you know, do, you know, and I'm like, what if it's not a wrongness though? And we really start to kind of look at like, okay, but what are all the things that you can do
Yes,
because you have this ability as opposed to a disability? And, you know, we've kind of looked at like, I have a client who works for, you know, one of the cell phone companies. And, you know, she's makes herself wrong all the time for feeling like she's not getting enough done. And we've talked about like, yeah, but the gift in that is that she's expressed to me that she has the ability to be in a conversation and hear, she's a manager, and hear all of her other employees' conversations with all of their customers all at
wow.
the same time, and can know, oh, I need to intervene over there, or oh, I need to like get this product over there, while simultaneously holding a conversation here.
Mhm.
And I'm like, can you see that as ability? Most people don't have that. They can't listen to 6 conversations all at the same time and know what's required where. But if you start to see that ADHD is actually an ability to pay attention to what's relevant and let go of the noise that isn't, that's
Yes,
where people make themselves so wrong, because they think that like, oh, I can't focus or pay attention. Well, no, you can't focus or pay attention to irrelevant things.
yes.
When something's relevant, it'll ping you and you know, oh, I have to do this, or this is what's required here.
Mhm.
And it's actually can create a lot more ease in business and work and relationships and everything else when you have kind of a way of navigating it and actually acknowledging it as an ability, as opposed to like just going into all the things you think are wrong with you.
That's fantastic. Have you ever thought of writing a book about all your experiences changing from more traditional to using the access tools?
You know, I'd actually really love to. I've been asking what that book is.
Yeah,
So thank you for that.
I think getting that information out would be amazing. I don't
Wow.
do quote regular psychotherapy anymore, but I am a bit older than you. So I'm sort of semi-retired, except for my right recovery access work. But
Yeah, it's
I
amazing.
would love to see a book like that come out. I think that
Wow.
would be fantastic.
Well, thank you so much, because that's something I've really been asking for that book to show up, and like, what does it want to be? So that's,
Yes,
thank you. I'm
yes.
like, wow, that's so great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Um, so we've really focused on your practice, which sounds fantastic. Are there other left turns that have been important to you in your life?
Yeah. You know, it's interesting because the practice is like this really clear thing, right? I went from
Yes,
this to this.
yes.
I do look a lot at like just the way I am with my kids and the way I parent. And I think that's also really different.
Mhm.
And I don't know if it's, you know, maybe it is a left turn. It's interesting just because it's something I've really looked at of, you know, I've always sort of talked to my kids as infinite beings, as adults, as, you know, and not in a talking to them about inappropriate things, but like in a way of like really being present with them and not ever um making them wrong or talking down to them, or, things like the things I hated as a kid, right?
Yes.
You think about like people who are condescending or things that kids don't know anything.
Yes.
And I really have played with empowering them to like, hey, like, what do you know? And what's different, what's possible. And am I perfect? No. Like there's definitely times that I yell
I
at
only interview perfect people, I
right?
think.
I certainly lose it and yell at them sometimes, or all the things, but like there has been a lot of like really being in a lot of just conversations with them around like access and the world and what's, things that are actually true versus like what the world is sort of feeding them. And
Yes.
and that's actually been really cool. And one of the things too I've really looked at with my kids is sort of this empowering them to know that they know. A story that comes up occasionally is that my 8-year-old son um is magical. I mean, I have 3 sons, and they're all really amazing and really different. All total X-Men, all very ADHD and some OCD kind of wrapped in there with them. And but my 8-year-old is my youngest, and um he asked last Christmas. So we're at almost a year now. We were driving home from Christmas, activities with the family. And my mom had Alzheimer's for, I don't know, 10 years, 8, 9, 10 years.
Wow.
And so, I mean, she was in a facility kind of towards the end. And he said on Christmas Day, we're driving home, and out of nowhere, he says, "Mom, does your mom want to be ashes?" And I was
Wow.
like, I don't even know that you had any understanding of what that means. I was like, Reese, I was like, what are you aware of? I was like, is my mom die? And he was like, yeah. Oh,
Wow.
I don't know. Like as soon as he said it, he like realized like what he had said. And then he
Yeah.
was like, I don't know. And I was like, I think you do. I'm like, what do you know? And he's like, yeah, I mean, I think so. She died the next morning.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
And it was so funny because I called my husband. I was like, hey, my mom had a heart attack. Like, and he was sitting next to, because I worked the day after Christmas. My husband didn't. So he was home with the kids. And he said, my son was like, I knew, and then he made himself wrong because he was like, I shouldn't be happy that my grandma just died. But he was so like thrilled that he knew something. And it was really cool because I was like, wow, like what parent asks their kids, like, what do you know? Instead of being like, why would you say that? Why would you bring that? Like, what do you know what I mean? Like so many people would make their kids wrong. And I didn't even think about it because that's just like what we do. But, when I tell that story, people are always like, wow, like that's so interesting that like one, he knew, and
Yes.
also that you didn't make him wrong for knowing.
Yes. Well, he'd already been given permission to know or even introduced to the concept,
Right.
which is amazing. Absolutely. No, I think those are all left turns in parenting because we're taught you should parent this way. And there, like there's 68,000 theories. Well, I read this book and it said blah, blah, blah. And I tried that, all of that. But what it seems like you're doing is really going with what you know to be true for yourself and for your kids, which is so different.
Yeah. Yeah. It's one of those things that like I kind of like with the book. I'm like, yeah, you can't see what you're being. Like I have to really get
Yes.
present with it to be like, I guess this is really different.
Yes.
I realized that even like when they get in my 10-year-old gets in trouble at school, but less than it used to, but it used to be a lot. And but I found that like punishing him or yelling at him or making him super wrong without hearing his side of the story just wasn't really creating, and grounding him and all those things. And so we've really started to talk about like, okay, like what happened,
Mm-hmm.
and just like, okay, well, what do you know, what was going on for that person, or what was going on for you that
Yes.
you reacted in that way, or but like really instead of doing what I started out when he was young was just grounding him or taking away his electronics or something like that, and now it's a lot more of like, let's actually have a conversation about like what had occurred and like what was really happening and what are you aware of? You
Yes.
know, he really picks up on his teachers and other kids in the class and all of their stuff. So like really reminding him of how aware he is has been
Yeah.
a
Who are you
huge.
acting out for? You know, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Well, it was interesting because like last year he had this teacher that was nice. Like there wasn't anything inherently wrong with him as a teacher, but he was very anxious. And I knew it the day I met him. And I was like, And every day before school, my son would have stomach aches and he would be so anxious to go to school. And about halfway through the year, I was like, is any of this yours? Or are you just like super aware of your teacher?
Yeah.
And it was interesting because this year he has a teacher that is not that, who's actually like lovely. And he doesn't have those stomach aches anymore. Like all the stuff that was showing up last year is gone. And
Wow.
so it's really like being like, hey, can you please acknowledge how aware you are? You know?
That's incredible. And it seems like he gets it too.
Yeah, more and more.
More and
Slowly.
more. I mean, it is because we're not fighting with this reality, but it's so present as to, you know, this whole idea that all your thoughts, feelings, emotions are yours, your depression, your whatever's yours, you know, you're this separate being, you have no awareness, you have to do what the experts say. I mean, all of that is like,
Yeah.
you know, so to be able to begin to go, hey, wait a minute, as a child, that's amazing.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
great.
Absolutely. I always think like, gosh, I wish somebody would have told me this stuff when I was a
Yeah,
kid.
me too. Absolutely. Instead of just making us wrong for being humanoids and asking too many questions and running around and, you know, all
Yeah.
the things we did as kids.
Right.
That
Well,
we
it's
were,
so interesting because, yeah, I mean, my 10-year-old definitely gets in trouble for asking too many questions all the time. And, you know, and people perceive it as anxiety, and maybe some of the time it is, but he just is infinitely curious and wants
yes.
to like have all of the information.
Yeah.
And I think about, I was so much like that as a child and was made so wrong for
Yes.
asking questions, you know? And so, I mean, that's such like another interesting thing where you can just look at now, you know, all the things you were made wrong for as a kid where you were actually, you know, actually just being in the question.
We're big in the question, talents and abilities. I remember Gary talking about how he used to pay Shannon, his stepdaughter, 50 cents for being quiet for 15 minutes. I mean, it was just, I'm sure we did drive our parents crazy, but that natural curiosity, that's out of a awareness, a brilliance. I mean, that's what creates in the world, that kind of curiosity. So I think that's very cool.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much. This has been a really fun interview, particularly for me. I mean, they're all fun, but to, you know, to talk to another therapist about all that you've done with that is really great.
Oh,
Do you have any last words for people or anything like that?
um, yeah, just what if everything you think is wrong about you is actually what's strong about you?
Yes.
And what, man, it's really looking at this like, if you would get out of judgment of you, like,
Yes.
what could you create that you've not allowed yourself to create?
That's a super great question. Well, thank you so much for being on, and really appreciate you being in the world and everything that you're doing.
Thank you so much for having me. It was such a gift talking with you.
Great. Thank you so much for joining this episode of Left Turn. I wonder what embracing left turns could create in your life. What magical possibilities might show up. Remember, when you choose left turns, you are joining a group of the most creative and brilliant people the world has ever known.